Israel and the Muslim world of today, as it is predicted in the book of Bereshit. So first, do you have any questions on what we've been discussing? So I'll begin again with the following, that we have gone a bit more deeply into the... Is it possible? Can you sit a bit nearer? Is that we have gone a bit more deeply into the prophetic announcements, threefold malachim, angels, who spoke with Hagar when she was pregnant, and then she was already given the instruction to call the son who's going to be born Yishmael. And then it also says, Yipere Adam, he will become a wild man. Which means, perhaps, as follows: Adam, he believes in one God. If he really brings that God to look after his character, the wildness can be controlled. And then we find at the end of Parshat Lech Lecha last week, we find that Avraham Avinu was given the name, a change of name, and given the promise that his seed would have the land of Israel. And on that occasion, Yishmael had been born, and he said, would that Yishmael would live before him, go in the right direction. So Hashem said, yes, he's going to become the source of a great people, of many peoples. He's also going to have 12 tribes, 12 princes of tribes, princes, Nisim. So he reached a high level, as was said at the end of last week's Parsha, because of the prayer of Ishmael. So then, this is connected with a covenant, the Brit Milah. And the Zchut of Brit Milah at the same time was given the promise that this piece of land we're in now, the land of Israel, would be given to the descendants of Abraham. And when Abraham made the Brit Milah, at the age of 100, then his son Yishmael also made Brit Milah at the age of a mitzvah. It says like this: there's two parts to Brit Milah. There's the cutting of the foreskin, and then there's an inner skin which uncovers the crown, and that has to be cut. That's called Periah. The root Periah, Peit Resh Ayin, is closely connected with the root Pere. So here we have, and to also connect the root to increase, Pru or Vu. In other words, the organ of reproduction has a fantastic task in the world. But this organ is able to do a few things. First of all, it makes sure that in nearly all instances a human being can become a father and produce offspring. That's Pru. How does it come about? It comes about using that instinct, the libido, which is one of the strongest, and some say the strongest instinct in the human being, which also is not just a question of a biological procedure, it also has enormous influence upon a person's emotions. It can become a source of lust and be completely wild and free, and extend itself to all types, even of perversions, all as an expression of lust. It can also be used for the highest love. The same energy can be used to be productive in other areas of life. It's well known that the creativity of a human being depends a great deal upon how he uses his libido, his sexuality. If a person is able to control it and direct it in the right manner, then this energy can increase the power of the mind, increase all the talents that a person possesses, if they are channeled and disciplined. If they're not disciplined, it can create a violence without any borders, without any limitations. To a Peri Adam, this power is especially strong, Yishmael. And therefore, Hashem even said, you were really the first son of Avraham. And Avraham very much wanted you to be part of the covenant. We can see even when Yitzchak wasn't born yet, and you had Yishmael, Avraham prayed to Hashem, let Yishmael, who carries the name of God, live in front of God. Yichyeh lefanecha. He should dedicate his life to Hashem. And not just believe in him, and your life is just enslaved to your physical libido, physical instincts. So Hashem promised, what did he promise? It says in the deeper ancient commentaries, he promised that the land of Israel is connected with the Brit Milah. That's clear from the end of last week's Parsha. Because the Brit Milah means, for the Jew, it means putting the stamp of God on all our physical energies. And Eretz Israel is a land which is very productive, and where you can have physical and material blessing on the highest level, if you use it in the channel fashion. That means if you have Mila, which is to cut it off, to cut it down, in order to create limitations, and if Priya, it should be used, it should be channeled in the right direction. So it said like this, Yishmael, this is the deeper meaning of that prophecy, Yishmael will be given the land of Israel, which is tied to Brit Milah, if the land of Israel is not occupied by Jews who are following the true path of Yitzchak Avinu. That means they are dedicating their lives to Hashem. But if the land of Israel should be free, there are no Jews around, or there are Jews around who do not fulfill the concept of the Brit Milah, then the Arabs have power. Ishmael's descendants will take it over. And that's the ultimate source, according to this understanding, of the power that Islam has over Israel today. In other words, we can say, since nearly all the Jews in Israel, even if they don't observe anything else, but they do want a Brit Milah, from all sections, nearly, they want a Brit Milah. Therefore, this is what protects us. But the point of Brit Milah, at the Brit Milah, what do we say? The point of Brit Milah, if it's an empty Brit Milah, even if we do Priya externally, but if we allow our other instincts, materialistic ones, to take over, then we're no better than Ishmael. And that's in every Brit Milah they do also a Priya. Ishmael today, they keep the Brit Milah until today. I mean, this prophecy become fulfilled. It's not like it was when the Tanakh, when the Bible was given. I mean, who could understand these things? You couldn't understand what they're talking about. But today we see things in front of our eyes. Nearly the whole Muslim world, they keep Brit Milah, but they don't do Priya. And we see, unfortunately, the interpretation of wildness, that they can do what they want as long as they believe, as long as under the call, the motto, Allah Akbar, God is Almighty, and everything they do in the name of God the Almighty. And even those who don't actually, some amongst them more secular, but those who belong to the fundamentalist group, they're nearly all, consciously or subconsciously, influenced by this concept, Allah Akbar. And therefore, if we go in the name of God, we can cut off people's heads and we can do whatever we want. That's what I showed you yesterday also in the Rambam. These are two it says that Muslims are very good. They keep the Shemitz ben Noach. They curb their instincts. That's one of the reasons Eva Menachai is one of the Sheva Mitzvahs. Always wonders why it is. The concept is you must not follow instant gratification in the material world. That's the concept of Eva Menachai, instant gratification. No, you've got to discipline yourself. And if we find Jews that follow the same non-observant path as the Muslim world, they sometimes even go over also to criminality and so on. Well, we have to keep a high level, because we have taken upon ourselves also. We've taken upon ourselves not just the seven. The Brit Milah teaches us. There was Brit is how many numerical value. People like mnemonics. Brit, how much is it in numbers? 612. Yeah? Because the Brit Milah we do is one mitzvah, which introduces us to the other 612 mitzvah. So we have to take a larger because we've taken from ourselves. It says by the giving of the Torah, you've got to observe my Brit as become a kingdom of priests. You've got priestly role in connection with the nation, just like the priests in the people of Israel have a larger number of mitzvot than the average Jew, some Israel. So also the Sheva mitzvah, no, they're not for 7, they're about 70 or so, about 100. And the average Jew has, in his life, and practically, he has about 200 mitzvot. Because the 613 includes things that are in exceptional circumstances, includes the mitzvah on the high priest, which is separate from the mitzvah of the ordinary priest, and so on. So, if we, in Eretz Yisrael, we fill Eretz Yisrael with mitzvot, that's what's protecting us. And who is saying this? Not just the Jewish people today. This was said in the last war, the Tzuk Eitan war. Some call it just the Mivtza, not the war, whatever you want to call it, the 50 Days War. What did Hamas say? The leaders of Hamas, and also those in the mosques. The mosque preachers who are the most fundamentalist people who entice them to go and kill Jews. Because they say that the Jews, they're not fulfilling their task, and therefore we've taken over. So in the war they said, how is it? We've got the most advanced missiles. We're given them by Iran and by Qatar. We've paid everything. And we've been trained. And whenever we use them, they hit their targets. We use them against the Egyptians, and they killed 36 people. And we use them against the Jews. Don't tell me they say this Kippur Bazel, or it helps a little bit. But certainly there were hundreds and even thousands of missiles shot that just didn't hit the target. So therefore they said, God must love the Jews. The Jews are being too religious for us. So therefore they're getting back their land. Yeah? And therefore what do we have to do? We have to try and make sure the Jews don't be so religious. And these, I'll tell you, even in our Knesset, where we have Arabs, some of them side very much with our so-called peace partners who are enemies. It's many of them. And even in the Knesset, they're really enemies of the state of Israel. When they go over the border, they're thrown out for a time. But many of them, they want to keep their power within the democracy of Israel. So sometimes that's how they look at it. Some of them side with the religious, some of them go against the religious. Because better the Jews don't become religious, then we're going to win the war. As it's been expressed frequently. In fact, I saw now that when Chaim Herzog, who was a diplomat, also spoke at the United Nations, when he took up the Bible and said, this is our charter on the land of Israel, he quoted from the Bible, where the land is promised to the people of Israel. It's also written in the Quran, by the way. So one of the representatives of Jordan, of the Palestinians, says to him, well, very nice you bring out these verses from the Bible, but you keep everything else written in the Bible that the Jews have to keep? So they have to keep quiet. Yeah? And I know a case where there was a debate amongst Palestinian prisoners in Israel on Pesach. They had a big debate. Who's going to win? Are we Arabs going to take over Palestine as we really want? as even now our so-called peace partner is saying, we've got to get rid of the Jews. Moses is saying the same as Arafat. Arafat, he got the Peace Prize. Yeah, very nice. They spoke very nicely. Yeah? And Abu Hassan speaks even more nicely. After all, he's a graduate, I don't know if it's Oxford or Cambridge or whatever. So it's very nice. But now it's siding with Hamas. He's saying all sorts of things against the Jews. Jews have no right to be in this land. And what does he say? We need to have more. He even praised the murderer, the latest Islam terrorist who killed the baby or whatever. He praised him. He gave him, they praised him. So he's not praising the terrorists. Like Arafat said, we have to have 1 million suicide bombers and take Jerusalem over. And today the battle's about Jerusalem. They're becoming very particular about this. And this is all in the Quran, they recognize Jerusalem really belongs to the Jews. On the other hand, there's some things were taken out of context. You say there were times when Muhammad, he opposed the Jews. It's quite true, there were times. But on the whole, it's very much pro the Bible of Moses. And today, in most education institutions, amongst the Palestinians, they don't permit them even to have a look at the Tanakh in the schools. And if any student there, they say on the maps, this area is never called Israel. It's blocked out entirely, or it's called Palestine. That goes right through the Middle East these days, this concept. And so really, this is the battle today. Are we Jews going to fulfill the Milah completely or not? And this is Peri Adam is connected with Peria. So I think this is an important point. So we now come to next week's Parsha. But before doing so, any questions or any comments from you? Okay, so we continue. If you look in this week's Parsha, yeah.
The decision that the descendants of Ismail can inherit the land of Israel if the Jews, as long as the Jews are not religious, as long as not fulfilling the mitzvot. Is it a decision that they came up with, or it was actually a real decision that Hashem decided that it should happen?
Look, this is a concept developed from what we're told in the, let's say, the oral tradition that accompanies the episodes which are related in the Chumash, and afterwards also inscribed by the prophets what will happen ultimately. So, and amongst the Muslim world, there are some who feel that as well. They're quite ready, like say, like today, the Kurds, and like in Italy, many of the Muslims, even in Morocco, they do very much follow a concept of Islam, even being friendly towards the Jews, being certainly open towards the Jews, and they want to regard Islam as being a religion which promotes a high standard of morality. And there are even many groups amongst them that are saintly, and they believe in one God, an entirely pure spiritual God, and their lives are dedicated to kindness and to try to remove this violent streak. So they're certainly on a high level. And we would regard them as like it's the same class. If you want to speak about different classes mentioned, the Chumash, they're like a Ger Toshav. The Ger is frequently mentions the Chumash, like I quoted yesterday, the letter of the Rambam to Ovadia Hager, where he says, he more or less says the Rambam, that the Arabs, you can't regard them as idolaters, and you can't, you've got to know those Arabs who keep the basic code which is given to mankind. They're on a high level, and this Ovadia Hager was previously a Muslim. He was a very good person amongst the Muslims. As there are today also. Today there was some individual, I've forgotten this, I saw once a write-up about a person who was born a Muslim, carries on as a Muslim, and he goes around preaching in America that Islam is one of the great religions which takes its basis from the Torah of Moshe, and it carries on through the certainly there were periods in the life of Muhammad himself, and if you don't interpret this as happened, it was the Middle Ages, there was some sect that started interpreting the Quran not as it's written. But if you take the Quran as it's written, the major emphasis of the Quran is you've got to lead a saintly life. Okay, you're given a physical paradise. Yes, it all comes in as well, of physical nature. But still it's given to people who are saintly. And it's true that Islam was established to spread faith in one God in the world, and not necessarily, you don't do it by destruction. And the idea of a jihad, that they've got to kill everybody, was not non-Muslim. There was a period in Muhammad's life when he also said that those who are non-believers in Hashem, who are, I don't really say they're idolaters, but they don't believe in one spiritual God. At that time, most of the Christian world also believed in the physicality of God. And nearly the whole Christian world was on the side of the Catholics, and they used to worship an idol. Jesus put up as a figure, and they did the masses. You know, the masses. You know, it's an idolatrous concept. In other words, that if you eat, when they have the mass, it's like a celebration that through his blood, through which he was crucified. As a result of that, if you absorb some of that blood, so you're immediately saved. All types of idolatrous concepts. And as the Rambam says, it's true, many of the Bedouins, the early Bedouins, even those who were influenced by Christianity, so the Christianity involved with idolatry. But even Christianity has become more spiritualized. Even let's say the Unitarian Church believes that the Trinity is unity. And in fact, there were many Jews who said that in the early days of the Reform, said there's no need for us to carry on a separate religion. I think it was one of the founders of the Reform movement, in the early times of Germany, who approached the Unitarian Church, I don't know, it was in Hamburg, not Berlin, and he asked them, can the Jews join them? But there at that time the Jews wanted to become assimilated. Why should we have to do two different groups? Let the Jews all become members of the Unitarian Church. The Unitarian Church believes that because of the Trinity, there's three aspects of one God who is purely spiritual. And they interpreted the concept, the Father, the Son, the Holy Ghost, they interpret this in symbolic terms, symbolic ways. And the truth is that many Christians today, that's what they believe. They no longer are succumbing to the illogical concept that God, who is the creator, the scientific God, let's say, who has become more widely known. The God of the scientists is the spiritual God of the creator and the one who keeps creation going. When it says in the Chumash, you are the one who keeps everything alive, that's accepted by most scientists. Who keeps everything alive? The power of God. Even though many scientists want to give it a different name. But still, it's something which is how God is described in the Bible. And all the metaphors about God, they're just symbols, like we've always explained. Those are anthropomorphisms. So God is the one who keeps, God is the source of all energy. That's how they describe the creation chapter we're dealing with. So therefore, they say, let's be like them. And the Muslims similarly. The medieval Muslims certainly. Medieval Muslim thinkers were on a very high level, and many of them became saints. And today that carries on. As I think Sheikh Palazzi is a great philosopher as well. He's the head of the university of the Muslim department of the University of Rome, and he's the main leader of the Muslims in Italy. And he says, of course, the Temple Mount it should really be dedicated to the Jews. Okay, we're going to work something out. But the Jews themselves, they say, are not allowed to go up. So therefore, one can make an arrangement. But as we know, that's also Jews are being protected to some extent because they're not really allowed to go on the place where the temple stood. So it's got to be. So therefore, they've taken over. So then we have plenty of. There are probably a good few millions amongst the Muslims who are very pro-Jewish and who are also striving for saintliness. But the others, there's so many, even billions, have been taken over by the fundamentalist concept. And they even Iran also, they developed it. The Mahdi is going to take over the world and so on. And they're biding their time, with a nice smile to the Americans and to Obama. But they're preparing themselves for what they regard as being a fulfillment of what it says in our Bible. That before the Mashiach comes, there are going to be world wars. So they think we're fulfilling it. And they've even invented their Mashiach, their Mahdi, they call it. They're preparing for it. They say for that we can use non-conventional weapons. For that we can use gas, like they're using gas today already, to go and kill. But as it says in the Chumash, it is the schus of those who keep the Torah in Israel. It says in the Chumash, when you do teshuvah in the land of Israel, then Hashem will bring these curses of using gas to kill Jews. Instead of that, they're going to use the gas to kill one another. That's happening in Syria. It happened also in Iraq and Iran. It's happened already. So these things are happening today. So any other questions? So anyway, yesterday on the matter you raised, so I brought, there's a collection of all the letters of the Rambam. They're fantastic insight into the Rambam's involvement. So this letter to Ovadia Ger is fantastic, and all Jews should read it. Never mind Galen. And there he even praises Islam, and points out that there's Islam. What do you mean? That even, it says, even the Islamites who do ignorant things like they throw stones in Mecca as a sign of worship, which goes back to an idolatrous source. But it says they don't mean it. They all believe that God is pure spirit. And they carry on certain customs. Underneath, that's their basic belief, God is pure spirit. And many of them try to live a saintly life, a good life. But he's got another tshuva, which is sent to Teiman, where he says, there's no people who have been so cruel to us and made it so difficult to make peace with them as the Muslims. And he brings a proof from Bereshis, as we'll soon see, from different things, and also in Tehillim. It's proofs, different proofs. Before we come to the proofs, I think it would be good we should study a bit this coming week's parsha. Because let's go in history. So Yishmael was born first. He reached Bar Mitzvah. And then shortly afterwards, in fact at the same time as this happened, when Avram thought, both my wife Sarah and myself, we're very old, who says we're going to have another child? Separately from Sarah. And Sarah, in fact, thought it was not possible. So that's why she wanted Ishmael to be, originally, to be raised by her, to become the true heir to Avram. And Avram certainly wanted it. And that's what he said in the Bar Mitzvah. He said, well, he agreed to do the Bar Mitzvah. But as soon as they wanted to do Priya, he jumped up and said, I'm not doing Priya. He didn't want it. But he said, nevertheless, he joined me in the Brit Milah. So maybe if he will live in front of you, so let him be. So Hashem said, he's going to be a great nation, and he'll have all blessings. There's going to come a time. I don't know when, it doesn't say when. The time only came a couple of thousand years later. But we know it did come. Muslim, in the Middle Ages, became one of the greatest powers. They were even able to drive out the Crusaders. Christians tried to take it over. The Jews were not there to talk him out. It was just one family left. So the Christians wanted to have it. And then there were battles with the Crusaders and the Muslims. And who won? The Muslims won. And they took over, basically. At the end, they left some Christian spots, but that's how empty of Jews, more or less. Jews started coming back and later on. But meanwhile, the Muslim countries, they increased in volume and even increased in their armaments. And then they had all this oil. They became economically the greatest power in the world. And that's why the Americans, all the time, they know they have the oil, and we don't have it. And we need the oil. That's hinted at in Yador HaKol, all the blessing that Hashem gave to them. And most of them are using it for evil, unfortunately. Even Qatar became multi-billionaires, a small group of Islam. They are the main financiers for Hamas. They pay them everything, or what they want. And Hamas is not so much different from Daesh, except they want to be with violence, and they certainly want, they've said all the time, our aim, we want to drive all the Jews out, except the Jews already become properly Muslims, more or less, the same as Daesh. And Daesh, meanwhile, they're aiming against the Western powers, and unfortunately, they've even started investigations how they can use the latest non-curable plague that's going on in Africa, Ebola. They want to use it to destroy all the non-believers. Non-believers is the Western world, and also Israel. They're not touching Israel yet, but who knows what's going on. Also, some Israels have gone over Daesh. Yeah? That's the greatest. The fact that a doctor in the hospital, it's admirable. I read today as well that now I think the sister or the niece of one of the heads of Hamas, who want to drive us out of this country, well, is being treated where? One of the hospitals, Jewish hospitals. It's a high level of chesed, and in some ways we should continue that in one way. That is we should have to ask God, but still, we simply speaking, we are dedicated, and we can say this perhaps one of the great qualities why Hashem is helping us, is because the whole of the people, we can say, of Israel, are dedicated to principles of kindness. And when a person is suffering, or a group is suffering, we do our best to remove it. And, but to say, if we think it really helps, the Rambam says in his letter to Taiman, one of the qualities, the fundamentals the Arabs do, which we can't get rid of, so it's very difficult to get rid of it, is their lies. They are enormous liars. As mentioned, they twist everything. And that's what's happening today. They say, the Americans and others, even now when they did a bombing, so in the bombing, of course, they killed hundreds of innocent victims, including women and children. Yeah? And they didn't give them a warning. They didn't tell them beforehand, we're going to do it. And don't dare go and use women and children as a shield. And here, in that latest war, we had no way of defending ourselves except to start bombing different areas. But we gave warnings. We said exactly, all the women and children and innocent citizens should leave. But we're only targeting the sources of the shooting that's going to us. Okay. So please, I'd like all of us to turn now to the way it's very interesting how it's interspersed in the life of Avraham and Sarai. What happens with Ishmael? Ishmael is why does it say it? Because Bereshit is a book of prediction. So it says, look at chapter 21. Where it says here, verse 8. It says, so Yitzchak was born, and what Yitzchak means, he laughs. Because Yitzchak is a fulfillment
What page?
Well, in the Jewish Bible, it's page 21. Page 21 at the top.
Okay, right, thanks.
He who laughs last, laughs best. That's Yitzchak. Well, she laughed last because all her life she thought she couldn't have a child. In the end, it was fulfilled. It was a joke. It was something which was unexpected. But at such an old age, she was able to have a baby without what they call today, without having experts on fertility to try and produce it somehow. No, Hashem gave her Yitzchak. Who would have thought it would be possible? Anyway, this child was weaned, and then it says in verse 8, so Avram made a big feast on the day when he weaned Yitzchak. So then what happened? I mean, Hagar, we know that she was told by the Malach, regard yourself as a maidservant and not as the mistress of the house. And I suppose it wasn't easy for her. When she saw Ishmael grow up, Ishmael was the only one, so she thought, oh, I'll keep a low profile, but Ishmael is surely going to be the successor. So when they saw Yitzchak was born, and even they made a big feast, in other words, Yitzchak is the true son, as Hashem had prophesied to Avram and Sarah, he would be the true son, the true one would inherit. Then of course she became she herself, together with her son, felt he was being pushed aside. To some extent he was. So Sarah saw, and here she called the names Benu HaMitzvahs. She's no longer called the son of Hagar, her maidservant. It's called the Egyptian. Because then she was the daughter of Paro, the granddaughter of Nimrod. She came from royal descent, the highest level of the empires of the emperor of the world. Nimrod was the emperor of the world, and Paro was emperor of the part of the world. And she was this daughter, and she left it all. And Pharaoh even recommended it when he saw the saintliness of Avram and Sarah. So she became also saintly. But the concept Egyptian came back a bit. And it says, and after all, she had given birth to Avram, to Ishmael. And what happened? She saw how this boy, who was now over bar mitzvah, question different explanation how old he was. Maybe in his teens, maybe in his 20s. But nevertheless, she saw was Metzachik. He was playing games. And this Metzachik, Rashi says, is an expression of murder and also immorality, and even also idolatry. In other words, they came back to Ishmael. The idea here is pushed aside by his half-brother, and this half-brother is taking over the whole household, while previously he was the one who took everything over. And of course also, his mother was being put aside a bit. She's only she was the co-wife of Avram, to some extent, but still. And she saw Metzachik, she saw his playing games, but dangerous games. Games that why he was an archer. It's quite a reform. He practiced archery, and perhaps by that time was already quite a qualified archer. So he took shots at his younger brother. It was just even still a child, little shots at him. Yeah, maybe even to practice how he was going to kill him. But he thought, "I'll just practice it." Meanwhile, also, he was going the wrong direction. He was already rejecting a bit, as happens to teenagers when they get to adolescence, rejecting to some extent his father, because his father recognized that Ishmael was also not the saint that he was hoping to get from Yitzchak, and that's what Hashem told him. So then he says, so she said in the next verse, so she said to Avram, drive out this maidservant and the son, for this son of the maidservant, with this maidservant, will not inherit together with my son, with Yitzchak. I think she specified all these points. In other words, It's interesting, the change of name. There's called Ben Abraham, it's called Ben Omar. She says she's supposed to be a maidservant. She's not the mistress of the house. Until now, when there was no Yitzchak, so she, were able to tolerate it. But now the antagonism, which comes both from the mother, in a more hidden way, and from the son, in even an open way, playing games, but dangerous games, and showing him a wrong example, we can't have him in our household. It can't be together. Because Avraham was still hoping, as we explained in the earlier Shia, there's no reason to exclude Ishmael. Ishmael, let's be inclusive and draw him near to the higher aims of the household of Avraham. I've got to always try to help him. And maybe he together, since both sons believe in one God, and that one God is a God of loving kindness, maybe they can work together. But Sarah said it can't work. I can see it can't work. How can I nurture Yitzchak if a person who's going to be on top of him, if after his 13 years, 14 years, 15 years, or perhaps even more older than him, so it won't work to drive him out. And it says here, it was very evil in the eyes of Aram on account of his son. He was very concerned that Ishmael was going the wrong way. It's Sarah who saw it. He didn't see it so much. He was always looking at the good side of Ishmael. He wasn't so critical, and he wasn't hoping Ishmael will turn up. So he was in doubt. What should he do? After all, his principles chesed. Even when it saves Sodom and Amorah, said, I've got to save Ishmael. If he's going the wrong way, let me keep him in the household, and I'll train him. I will train him to be a good follower of the house of Abraham. But God said to Abraham, Al Yirah, don't let it be bad, but do everything that Sarah says, because the true seed will come from Yitzchak. And don't think I'm neglecting Ishmael. Yeah? God says to him, listen, you're afraid to be merachek. After all, this is the problem. This is the problem. Today many families, unfortunately, in America as well as here, Haredi families. The Haredi, we've got to decide, they send children to Cheder, Yeshiva Katana, Yeshiva Gedolah, and they're dropouts. Yeah? Dropouts from some of the best. Even some Rosh Yeshiva and others got boys who are dropouts. If you want to know about them, here in the yeshiva, you can find out upstairs. Nearly all, and on one side upstairs, there's a yeshiva specially made for such dropouts. Yeah? They come from Haredi homes. You find them with tzitzis, but they're not settled. Can't settle in yeshiva. And it has a lot to do with the question that Avraham was faced with. What should we do? Shall we keep them at home? There's some parents, they say, shall we keep them in the house or not? Our yeshiva also comes, parents come to us, can he do something with his boy rather? They come from a Haredi home. They've gone off the derech, it's called. People have gone off the derech of the Torah. And it has to do with adolescent spirit of independence. If parents are not aware of this and they don't make preparations for it, then they'll go away. And also, it has something to do with trying to give every son the same type of education. There are some children in Haredi home, they'll take it up with great enthusiasm. Yeah? They've got loving parents, they support them, and they make great progress in everything, also in their behavior. And there are others that pressure them. You've got to go. Sometimes one of the problems is they pressure them too much in their learning. They say, got to start learning Gemara at an early age, they're not ready for it. Some need to learn Gemara at a later age. They've got to keep to everything in a strict manner like the other brother. Why aren't you like your brother? So then, it comes a time that either some parents say, well, got other children here, he doesn't behave anymore like a Haredi Jew, so he's older than the others, so we better ask him to go somewhere else. Sometimes that's from the parents. And sometimes parents wait until until this boy said, I can't stand it anymore at home. I'm going away. And they just disappear. That's what's happening today. That's happening here. Because Avraham said, my son Yishmael is also, how can I throw him out of the house? But she said, no, our household is very important. We have to drive him out. Because he won't inherit. Anyway, so it says in the next verse, don't think, Avraham, Yitzchak is going to be your true inheritor. But Ben Amah will also become a great nation, because it's still your seed. And therefore Avraham got up in the morning, and he took bread, and took a skin bottle of water, and he gave it to Hagar, placed it on her shoulder. He took the yelet, it wasn't really such a yelet, but still, it was quite they took him, but he was behaving like a child, that's what. And they went and they wandered in the desert of Beersheba. There was no water left, so he threw off the yelet under one of the bushes, and then she sat opposite and had nothing to drink. And it was a distance of a shot from the arrow. She said, I don't want to see the death of the child. And she sat and she started crying. And the boy also cried, obviously. And Hashem listened to the voice of the boy, and an angel came to Hagar, like he come before, and he said, don't be afraid, Hagar. God has heard the voice of your boy where he is. Lift him up, strengthen him, because I'm going to make him a great nation. And then God opened her eyes, she saw the well of water, and then she filled the bottle with water, and she gave to drink to the boy. And the boy grew up, lived in the desert, and he became a teacher of archery. And they settled in this desert, and his wife took him a wife from Egypt. Now all these things are very deep. So I'm going to now give you a fantastic midrash. You're all accustomed, I'm sure, all of you been to a house Friday night, and we sing Eshet Chayil. So the midrash says Eshet Chayil refers to Sarah, the mother of the Jewish people. She was an Eshet Chayil. She was the woman of valor. As you know, because Eshet Chayil is said by the host of the house. He says it on his wife, the hostess, who is after providing and preparing the nice Shabbos meal for all the guests. But if we sing it also as Bachrim, to think of who's going to be the ideal match for ourselves. So it begins, Eshet Chayil, me and so can find such a fantastic wife, who is worth more than all the diamonds and precious jewelry in the world. And it refers to sorrow. So one of the verses, Tzemo Fishtim. So Tzemo Fishtim, if you look at Eshet Chayil, it mentions that she uses wool and linen. If you look at the end, you can look it up inside. I'll tell you the verses in Jerusalem Bible. It's the last chapter of the book of Proverbs. So there it says, on page 825, it says that verse 12, Dor shotzem ofishtim, bataz bechevetz kapeh. She sought out wool and linen, and she produces from wool and flax, working willingly with her hands to produce garments.